Another day, another pilot leaking online. This time it's Constantine. If you remember, recently we had the Flash pilot leaking online, and now it appears this one has joined the ranks as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gotham appearing online at some point in the near future too. If you remember back, we actually had the Wonder Woman and Aquaman pilots both leak online as well. So maybe this is a way to kind of gauge audience reaction. Nevertheless, here it is. It's leaked online. I got a chance to see it. So what's it like? Now, to give you some kind of background on Constantine, and if that name sounds familiar with you, you may have seen a movie starring Keanu Reeves a little while ago. So there has actually been an adaptation of this previously. The Keanu Reeves film did take some kind of liberties with the actual Constantine character and kind of changed him quite a lot from the comic books of which he is based. A comic book called Hellblazer. Now, this TV series is trying to kind of be a little bit more faithful to the actual source material and make the character of John Constantine be more sort of straight off the page that we've seen in these kind of Hellblazer books. Now, obviously, Hellblazer isn't actually an American character, or John Constantine isn't an American character. Obviously, that's portrayed by Keanu Reeves. And he's basically a kind of hard-drinking, hard-smoking Scot who is kind of blonde hair, and his appearance was actually based on Sting in the original comics. And they've kind of retained the majority of that for this kind of incarnation, which is a good, even down to his kind of sort of little skinny tie and what he wears. So I think it's a good adaptation, literal adaptation of the actual John Constantine character. Now, does that make a good pilot? Well, I'll come on to that. So this is kind of an introductory dip into the world of the supernatural, if you're not kind of familiar with it. And basically, John Constantine is an exorcist, and we kind of pick up a good few years, I guess, into him doing this. And he's basically tormenting himself over the loss of a young girl who he's down to him, essentially, has been damned to hell. And he's kind of just trying to convince himself by checking him into a kind of mental institute and try and get himself to believe that the kind of supernatural doesn't actually exist. Of course, it does, and it comes looking for him when he is basically called to help a young girl who is a daughter of a former colleague of his, and he's kind of pulled into this world once again. He grounds up a few colleagues who he has kind of like floating around, kind of a few kind of questions about where they come from, and that's kind of one of the main hooks of this pilot, I'd say. And ends up helping this girl who looks like she's going to become part of this kind of like almost supernatural team that sort of John Constantine looks like he has. And we kind of see, various kind of supernatural entities along the way, possessed people, demons, angels, they're all there. So, is it any good? I actually really like this pilot. I think it's one of the best pilots I've seen and kind of catch you hooks. If you have seen the TV show Supernatural, it is very much like that. It is near enough the same type of show, with maybe a little bit sort of edgier horror, I would say. Certainly the first half of this pilot, I thought the actual effects, and that there are some decent sort of horror moments in it, with some decent scares, some decent kind of makeup effects and things like that. Towards the second half, I suppose it gets a little bit more kind of your sort of stereotypical TV action-y type sort of show. But the first half certainly was quite, quite scary for a kind of, I guess, a network TV show. Now, I guess if I had some criticisms of this sort of pilot, I would say the effects are a little on the cheap side in certain areas. Some of the sort of CGI they use, especially there's a couple of scenes involving sort of electric cables, look kind of, fairly sort of cheap CGI. But let's be honest, this is a TV budget, and this pilot isn't actually meant to be aired yet, so there is still time. I guess they could sort of make some changes with that. But overall, that's kind of a relatively minor criticism, because the effects look okay a lot of the time. I've mentioned some of these kind of possessed people and things like that. They look pretty damn good, and pretty much as good as you're going to see in the majority of these sort of horror films that you see anyway. So, the effects a bit of a mixed bag overall. The only other criticism I would say is characters other than kind of John Constantine himself are maybe a little bit on the sort of cliche side. John Constantine is kind of an anti-hero. He's kind of like a sort of roguish kind of Han Solo type character almost. So he's kind of almost instantly appealing because you kind of want to know what's going on. He's kind of, a good guy, but with sort of murky sort of grey areas perhaps. But we see him sort of team up with a few other people, a kind of nerdy hacker guy who is pretty much what you'd expect. The kind of the clueless but ends up being a sort of strong girl, that sort of thing. One of his other colleagues is kind of basically his driver. There's some interesting moments with him, certainly, that's going to keep you thinking what's going on there. There's obviously more to that, and that's kind of one of the good things about this pilot. There are a few hooks we're kind of told that there's some kind of like growing menace, and that sort of that sort of the demons are kind of doing something again. More hooks going in. There's also quite a major connection to the DC universe. Now, when I went into this, I didn't think it would pretty much be connected to the sort of the DC universe, but there is one scene. I won't spoil it for you in case you don't know. That is very, very kind of in line, shall we say, with the kind of the DC universe. And I think it doesn't out say it's kind of in the same universe as kind of maybe the films or other sort of DC universe TV shows, but we'll see. I thought the guy who played John Constantine did a pretty good job here. He kind of reminds me a little bit of the guy who plays Stackhouse from Jason Stackhouse from the True Blood show. He kind of reminds me of that. Just kind of very sort of cocky, but obviously with a bit of a with a sort of Scottish accent, and he kind of looks like that as well. But he looks pretty faithful, I would say, to the source material. There was a big hoo-ha recently about that the network won't allow smoking in the TV show, and John Constantine is kind of a heavy smoker, and you don't actually see him smoke, but you do see him put out a cigarette butt, so it's kind of, I guess they're sort of skirting it as much as they can. That personally doesn't bother me, to be fair. So I'm not a smoker myself, so I don't really care necessarily if I see him smoking. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. And John's motivations in the TV show, basically, he's ultimately responsible for damning the soul of a young girl to hell, and that's basically what he's seeking his kind of redemption for ultimately. And the question is he a good guy because he wants to be a good guy, or is it just more for sort of selfish means? But overall, I thought it was a very good pilot. I guess some of the smaller characters really weren't developed and kind of seem a little bit cliche, and the effects maybe not quite as good as maybe you'd expect in some sort of TV shows if you treat yourself, say, Walking Dead and things like that. But overall, this was a good pilot. It was, it had some good scary moments in it. It was well made, interesting central character, and it sets up a lot of kind of mythology that I think is going to kind of want you to watch it further. I actually enjoyed this better than the Flash pilot. I'm going to go 8.5 of this one out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.